Hello students, so we're looking at chapter 5 today. We're starting with section 5.1. Before I begin, I just want to let you know that chapter 5 is our last official chapter on linear relations, okay? So we're kind of going to consolidate everything, talk about slopes and intercepts, etc. in this chapter once more, piecing everything together. So 5.1, today we are looking at the slope of a line. We're going to analyze the slope of a line. So let's recall our formula for slope. Slope has equation rise over run if I'm looking at a graph. In terms of the actual equation, that would be delta y over delta x, and that's equivalent to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. In the equation of a line, when I have a line in slope-intercept form, the equation is y equals mx plus b. Let's remember that this m represents our slope and the b represents our y-intercept. So looking at our first example, I want you to sketch the following lines, and then I would like you to classify each according to the following properties. Falls to the right, rises to the right, steep, or shallow. Okay, so our first line, y equals 5x minus 7. I start with my y-intercept, which is negative 7, put a dot there. My slope is positive 5, so it's 5 over 1. So up 5, right 1, and connect. So there's my line. In terms of how this line moves, as I move from left to right, I can see that it is rising to the right. Okay. Now in terms of shallow or steep, I'll get back to that in a moment. Moving on to my second line, my y-intercept is 3, so I put a dot on 3. My slope is 4 over 5, so rise 4, run 5, dot, and connect. So there's my second line. Again, this second line, as I move from left to right, it also rises to the right. So in terms of steep or shallow, if I compare these two with each other, I can see that clearly this one here is steeper and this one here would be shallower. So I'll label them that way. Looking at my next two lines, third and fourth one, y equals negative 8x. So my y-intercept here is 0. My slope is negative 8. So down 8, right 1, or I could, if I wanted to, go up 8, left 1. Connect with the straight line. So clearly this line falls to the right, and I should be able to describe it as steep. I can tell that it's very steep. My last line, y equals negative 2 over 9x plus 2, starting with my y-intercept, which is 2. There it is. Slope is negative 2 over 9, down 2, right 9, connect. This line also falls to the right, and in terms of steep or shallow, I would say this is shallow. Okay. So, without graphing, we should be able to actually classify rises or falls to the right, steep or shallow, without drawing the graph, just by looking at the equation. So by looking at the equation, I can identify my slope. Well, if my slope is positive, then I know that my graph must rise to the right. If my slope is negative, I know that my graph must fall to the right. So here's a new word for magnitude. This word magnitude, it's a really fancy word. All that it means is the positive value of the slope. And another word for positive is absolute value. I'm always looking for that positive number of the slope. Okay, so just fancy ways of saying take the positive. Now, this number, this magnitude, if my magnitude is really big, then my line will have a steep slope. If my magnitude is smaller, then the line will have a shallower slope. Okay, that's how we determine steep or shallow. So typically, if it's bigger than 1, we'll say that the slope is steep. If it's in between 0 and 1, we'll say that it is shallow. Okay, example 2. Draw the shallowest line possible. So let's imagine, well, the shallowest line means it's really easy for me to walk, right? So the shallowest line would be a horizontal line. So here I've drawn my horizontal line. I want to pick 2 points on this line. So on this line, I'm going to pick the points 3, 3, and 8, 3. There are lots of points. You could pick any point you want. I just randomly chose those 2 points right there. Okay. I'm going to use these 2 points to calculate my slope. x1, y1, x2, y2, plug into my formula, and I see that my slope equals 0. Next, looking at this blue line, I'm going to identify the y-intercept. Well, the y-intercept is right there. The y-intercept is 3. So if I put those two pieces of information together, my slope is 0, my y-intercept is 3, my equation becomes y equals 0x plus 3, or simply y equals 3. And I can do that for any line at all that's horizontal. I can calculate the slope. The slope will always be 0. So the equation ends up being the y-intercept, y equals 3. Looking at this green line that I've drawn, y equals 0. Looking at my red line, y equals -7. Each of these three lines are horizontal, which means they each have a slope that is 0. Okay, we're going to repeat this, but now we're going to draw the steepest line possible. So I'll work in blue. Here's the steepest line I can imagine drawing, right? Steepest line ends up being a vertical line. If I want to pick 2 points on this line is made up of many points. Look at all the points I've marked. I'm going to pick 2 of them. My first one has coordinates 6, 1, and my second point will have coordinates 6, 7. I'm going to use these 2 points, x1, y1, x2, y2, to calculate my slope. And what happens here is when I go ahead and calculate, I end up with 6 over 0. So I can't take 6 and divide by 0. That's undefined, which means my vertical line has an undefined slope, a slope that we cannot calculate. So if I were to choose several other points on this line, what do you notice about all these points? All these points on my blue line, they all have something in common. They all have an x value of 6. Notice that? So that's going to help us come up with the equation, because I can't use y equals mx plus b here because I don't have a slope. It's impossible to define the slope. So my equation will become, again looking at my points, they all share this common x value. My equation becomes x equals 6. So any vertical line always has equation x equals a number. And I've gone back and drawn in a green vertical line. Notice all the points on this green line have an x-coordinate of -8. So my equation for my green line is x equals -8. All the points on my red line have an x value of 0. So my equation here is x equals 0. So to summarize, when we have a horizontal line, our equation is always y equals a number, a constant. When I have a vertical line, my equation is always x equals a constant. And with my horizontal lines, my slope is always 0. It's very easy for me to walk it, think of that. And for my vertical lines, my slope is undefined. It's impossible to walk a vertical line, right? So there is no slope there. Okay, so for today, I would like you to work on these homework questions. If you have any problems, please reach out to me and I will do my best to get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.